The Inside Transportation Podcast is sponsored by Ford Motor Company. Built on the belief that freedom of movement drives human progress, from connectivity to autonomy, AI to machine learning, Ford has one simple goal: to improve mobility for its customers. To learn more about Ford's work in mobility, autonomous vehicles, and their corporate efforts to improve mobility for its customers, visit corporate.ford.com. That's corporate.ford.com. The Inside Transportation Podcast is also sponsored by Fenwick & West. Fenwick & West is one of the world's first and leading law firms dedicated to technology and transportation. Learn more about how Fenwick can help companies tackle the complex legal and business issues of autonomous transportation at fenwick.com. That's FENWICK.com. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Inside Transportation Podcast, a production of Inside.com. This is our weekly podcast where we discuss transportation trends that you need to know about to stay ahead of the curve. My name is Johan Moreno, and I'm the writer of the Inside Transportation and Inside Electric Vehicles newsletters, and I'm joined here by my co-host, angel investor, podcaster, Inside.com CEO, and the man who committed to taking out 331,000 of his Twitter followers out to ramen when the pandemic ends, Jason Calacanis.
Yes. It's good to be here. Ramen on me. Let's go. I can't
Ramen
wait.
on Jason. Just to give an update on a topic we discussed in a previous podcast. We'll touch a little bit more on Tesla later on in the podcast, but it appears that Tesla is closing in on 2 locations for its upcoming production facility. Jason, you want to take a guess? Unless you already saw what these 2 locations are.
Austin and Nashville, I guess, in Colorado. Those seem to be the ones I saw on social media people talking about without any inside information on my part.
So they've narrowed it down to Austin, which was one of your original picks. You put your money on Austin. And Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I did see the governor of Oklahoma tweeting, that's fantastic. I think they want to give them a big tax discount or something.
Yeah. So my guess for the production facility, Tennessee, is no longer being considered. But Jason, you just have that golden touch. Now, on to this week's news. We touched on this topic very briefly last week, but it's now time to take a deeper dive on Uber's potential acquisition of GrubHub and some of the reaction behind it. So both sides are reportedly haggling over the final price of the acquisition, although people close to the situation say a deal may be completed by the end of the month. But the deal has been criticized by a legion of politicians who pretty much want the deal dead before it's even been finalized. Keep in mind, both sides are still figuring out an agreement. Senator Elizabeth Warren panned the deal on Twitter, saying both Uber and GrubHub have a history of crushing smaller businesses and exploiting workers. She, along with Representative Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez, are proposing this pandemic anti-monopoly act, which would ban any mergers or acquisitions happening during, COVID-19. Senator Amy Klobuchar said if Uber takes over GrubHub, it isn't good for competition and it isn't good for you. She was referring to consumers. And she went on to say when big companies corner the market, it usually means more for them and less for you, especially in a pandemic. So she's challenging Trump antitrust enforcers to do something about it. Another representative, who is the head of the House Antitrust Subcommittee, David Cicilline, I think that's how you say it, echoed the same sentiment, basically calling for a delay on mergers during the pandemic. So we actually ran a poll on our Inside Transportation newsletter asking our readers what they thought about the acquisition. 69% of our readers said they don't think the acquisition is a positive for consumers, while 30% said yes. So Jason, what's the likelihood you see this deal getting done? And do you think that this merger will ultimately be a positive for consumers?
Okay, so
a lot to unpack, I know.
There's a lot to unpack. The first thing people have to realize is government officials have no idea how businesses operate and how they work. And what they've confused here is they've confused 4 new players in the market: GrubHub, Postmates, DoorDash, and Uber Eats, with the entirety of the market. So when all of these statistics are put together, you're taking those 4 companies and you're putting them together. and Grubhub's worth about $5 or $6 billion. You know who's missing from this?
Who?
Domino's. $15 billion company. Doing more revenue and a bigger market cap than Grubhub, right? I believe they're doing more revenue. We'll have to look it up. But their market cap's 3x, so I'm assuming they're doing a lot more revenue than Grubhub. So when you look at this, they're leaving out all of the actual, what they call in the industry TAM, total addressable market. Right now, only 30% of consumers will probably have used any of these apps, maybe 40%. So in other words, we're only in the third of 9 innings. So it's still anybody's game. If you define the total addressable market as those 4 companies, that is intellectually completely dishonest. Those 4 companies probably together equal, let's say a third of the market. And then we're only talking about maybe a third of people are ordering food on their phones anyway. So we might be talking about, these players have a third of what the actual numbers are. So the 50% might actually be more like 15. It's like when people talk about Amazon dominating, right? What they don't realize is the majority of people still go to supermarkets.
Right.
When people say they're dominating, they might be dominating Walmart in delivery, but they're not dominating Walmart in overall commerce, right? So it's very important to have an intellectually honest discussion about that. So they're also leaving out the fact that there are a massive number of software companies, and I'm looking at investing in them right now. If anybody has one of these companies, feel free to email me, Jason at Calacanis, or if you want to build it. People are building software for restaurants to have their own apps and their own websites to directly order. So just like, building a website used to cost $10,000, $100,000, $250,000, right? And then Squarespace came out, and you could make a gorgeous website that was better than anything that was made in the 10 years before it for $10 or $20 a month.
Right.
So that same thing is happening with apps right now. So Grubhub, DoorDash, and Uber Eats taking 30% is probably less than what it's going to actually cost companies to do it themselves. But there's a chance they might be able to do it for less. So you might have some local chain decide, we're opting out of these platforms, and we're going to tell our customers, and we have their emails, and they come to our store already, if you want Five Guys, go to Five Guys and download the app, right? And so even local restaurants are going to be able to do that. And that's what people don't realize about the competition. And that's why this is just anti-tech rhetoric as far as I'm concerned.
You make a really good point about Domino's, because I know another chain restaurant. I've had these sandwiches a few times, but Jimmy John's, you've been to Jimmy John's, right?
Haven't been to a Jimmy John's. It's like a Subway, right?
Yeah, it's like a Subway, kind of Jersey Mike's hybrid. But their whole thing is we're only delivering, like they're delivering, right? They have their own drivers. They're only delivering within a certain radius. And I think the deliveries are like $2. And how they're able to make up the money of what they're, paying the delivery drivers, and all the costs included are actually put into the food, right? So, an average sub would probably cost like $6 if you buy it at the grocery store. I would say the quality's about the same. So it costs like $12, right? But you're paying like $1 for delivery. You feel like you're getting a good deal and whatnot. So it's actually, you make a really good point about Domino's and Jimmy John's and how they've been able to kind of leverage their own resources. And then when you really think about it, right, the big competitor here, DoorDash, even if GrubHub and Uber Eats were to merge, they would only have about a 15% advantage in market share, right? I think this would be a bigger issue if it was DoorDash merging with Uber Eats or DoorDash merging with GrubHub, because they would have a bigger, share of the pie. But it seems right now that this deal, which by the way, we don't even know the terms of it, which is the other thing, is that I think our Twitter culture is so reactionary, and even politicians have kind of latched onto this whole idea of reacting to these things that are basically rumors at this point, right? There's no done deal. We don't know what the actual structure of this deal is going to be.
They've been talking for a while. They have a general idea. They want to pay $6 billion or something. But at the end of the day, there's an anti-capitalistic movement in the United States, anti-entrepreneurship, anti-capitalism, and it's there for a reason. We have a polarization of wealth that is mind-boggling, right? Mm-hmm. We also have a standard of living that's gone up and to the right for everybody, and people forget about that. And we had, prior to coronavirus, COVID-19, we had the lowest unemployment in our lifetimes. And the reason I believe we had that was because we created a floor of jobs with these delivery services, with ride-hailing, ride-sharing services, and with Airbnb and people being able to rent their couches. All of those things led to people who were entering the workforce or who needed a little bit of money to not need to go for a 12-hour or 10-hour shift at Target or Apple or Walmart and drive there, right? Those people have been having a hard time filling those jobs because people would rather make the $15 an hour, $20 an hour, sometimes maybe even 25 or 30 if it's a busy time, setting their own schedule, right? And just cherry picking the best time. So it's all part of this anti-capitalism movement that, let's face it, in some ways, capitalists brought them on themselves because they're just so obsessed with efficiency. And even Apple was paying Apple Store workers really low compared to like people who work at Apple proper. Right. It's like a caste system. Like if you work in the stores, you're like serfs. And if you work at the Cupertino campus, you're like a god. Same thing with Uber drivers versus people who work at Uber, Postmates executives versus Postmates drivers, or Airbnb hosts versus Airbnb executives. So what we need to do is close that gap just a little bit more, and I think the sentiment will go in a better direction. But we have to either let these companies merge, or just be prepared for one or two of them to go away, or if the competition is too cutthroat, you'll just see them leave markets. So, as far as I'm concerned, Uber Eats is in a pole position, and they have the network of drivers, so I think they're going to win anyway, or come in second. I think it's going to be first or second will go to DoorDash or Uber Eats. Second will go to the Uber Eats or DoorDash, and I think GrubHub will be third.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I don't think politicians kind of understand about the economics of delivery services right now is that nobody's making money. They're all unprofitable, right?
Yeah, and I mean, it's been really difficult.
Yeah, it's a really difficult market, not just for the restaurants, not just for the drivers, but also the companies, because of this competition. Right. So you have to eventually get one of the players out of the space in order for it to be a viable product that we can all enjoy for the future. I know I'm not old enough to remember this, but I always hear the reference to Kozmo.com. Do you remember that service?
I covered them at my first magazine, Silicon Valley Reporter, and another company, a venture capital group that met with Kozmo, couldn't invest in Kozmo, so they created their own competitor called Urban Fetch. And essentially, you could order whatever you wanted, get it within an hour or two, or it was free. And they had no minimum order size when they started. So it was all venture capital based. And then when the dot-com bust happened, they had to undo it. But I would literally order a quart of milk for my coffee, and it would come, and the tip would be larger than the cost. We had people in the office as journalists who would order packs of M&Ms as a joke. They'd order they had like a supersized pack of $3 M&Ms, which was the same cost as a store, but they would deliver it to you, and a bike messenger would show up. So it was pretty awesome. I tried to buy Kozmo, and I was going to make a version of it during the Web 2.0 era, but they wouldn't sell me the IP.
Really?
I tried to buy it, and JP Morgan, I think, owned it because the company shut down, and they had they were the big investors. And the person who was there, who was like a mid-level person, said, "Jason, I can't sell it to you." And I said, "Why not? I'll give you 20%. I'll go raise money, and then you'll still be in the game." And they said, "Yeah, but then you all make 80%, and we think you're going to make it work, and we're going to look really stupid. So we'd rather just not even get 20 cents back on the dollar."
So what's the big difference between what Kozmo was doing in the 90s? This was late 90s, as I remember, late 90s. What's the difference between what Kozmo was doing and what Uber Eats, GrubHub, and
it wasn't
DoorDash
for restaurants. It was for a pint of ice cream. It was for batteries.
Okay.
It was
so it was
for
like packaged.
So it was packaged. It was sort of like Amazon is at now with same-day delivery, or like Bodega. There was a startup called Bodega, which I think they changed their name because they culturally appropriated the name Bodega, which was kind of weird. That's a whole nother
was that
story.
in-office snack unit that you're talking about?
Yeah, it was a really clever idea, and they, bodegas were run. It was originally a term for, I think, Latin-based, Mexican Latin-based individuals running like a little 7-Eleven type corner store.
Mm-hmm.
But then you wound up having Koreans and people from the Middle East and Irish people running bodegas as well. It was a catch-all term, but anyway, bodega, they changed the name, but it's basically just a big cabinet with cameras in it. You open it with your phone, you say what you want, you take what you want. They trust you to not take everything because there's cameras in it. And if you did take everything, like the most damage you could do is $100, but by not having to have like fancy mechanics, you just open the thing up and take whatever you want, and it just charges you. And then they know what to refill because they got little, webcams in there. But that was the main difference. And then also it was for dense cities, and they used bicycles. So it was a bike messenger service, not cars.
Right.
And you didn't have to really worry about things like parking. You didn't have to worry about things like the pizza getting jostled and all the sauce and cheese going to one side, because you were delivering. At the time, the big thing was DVD rentals. So they were doing DVD rentals, newspapers, magazines, video games. Back when you had to buy media, there wasn't digital distribution. And so digital distribution really was the killer of that business as well as a negative unit economics.
Well, so there you go, everyone. Jason.
Lesson.
Jason just revealed that he almost tried to buy Kozmo.com. So go ahead, tweet about it.
I did buy a scooter. They had scooters like Vespas that were painted orange, and I bought one of them from them, and I used to drive it around Manhattan, and people thought they were like, "Oh, Kozmo's still in business?" I was like, "Nope, I bought the scooter for $500 off the back loading dock."
Yeah. That's crazy. Well, we're going to take a quick break here on the Inside Transportation podcast, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about Tesla super fandom, whether it's toxic for the development of electric vehicles. When we come back on the Inside Transportation podcast, stay tuned.
Hey, everybody. Just want to let you know that this episode of Inside Transportation is sponsored by our friends at the Ford Motor Company. Built on the belief that freedom of movement drives human progress from connectivity to autonomy, Ford has one simple goal, and that's to improve the mobility of its customers. Ford has been using technology to shape the future of transportation for over 100 years and is dedicated to solving the world's most pressing mobility issues. What you might not know is that Ford has a series of divisions that make these visions a reality. Ford X is Ford's venture incubator that unites entrepreneurs, designers, and engineers to shape the future of transportation. Ford's City Innovations team brings innovative ideas to life through community workshops, crowdsourcing initiatives, and citywide mobility challenges. And Spin, a property of Ford, brings e-scooter sharing to cities and college campuses. So here's your call to action. To learn more about Ford's work in mobility, autonomous vehicles, and their global efforts to improve mobility for its customers, visit corporate.ford.com. That's corporate.ford.com. Thanks again to Ford for sponsoring independent media like this podcast.
And we're back here on the Inside Transportation podcast. Johan Moreno, Jason Calacanis, talking about some of the hottest topics in the world of transportation. One of them being Tesla super fandom. So, Jason, have you ever noticed these Tesla super fans on Twitter? And I'm not just talking about Jason Calacanis fan level. I'm talking about like, I'm going to change my profile picture to a picture of Elon kind of level of super fan.
I can't keep up with the whole Twitter stuff because it did get like super toxic with the Tesla Q people, the short sellers. Mm-hmm. And then, it was like difficult for me because people know like I have friends at the company. And so I just get dragged into everything. Right. And it's just distracting. But I've seen there's a lot of super fans.
Yes.
And
which is usually a good indicator chaos for a company too. Right?
Sure. I mean, Apple has them as well.
Oh, yeah.
Apple has a ton of super fans who, if somebody criticizes Apple for taking the phone jack off, the iPhone, and people are like, that's stupid. Why would you remove that? People are like, you don't understand the future.
Right.
It gives us 3% more battery life. They can redeploy that space for the phone jack.
Yes. So something that really went viral on Twitter this week is that Fred Lambert, who's the editor-in-chief of Electrek, which is often described as a pro-Tesla, pro-electric vehicles blog. I believe they're under the 9to5 Mac and 9to5 like Apple kind of universe. So in an editorial, he accused prominent Tesla superfans of sharing misleading news and information about the company. Lambert was very critical against the Tesla superfan community, saying it was becoming toxic due to a slew of attacks against anything that can be perceived as negative toward Tesla. He said the attacks and misinformation are not contributing positively to the electric revolution. In one instance, Lambert actually said that Elon Musk called him anti-Tesla after he suggested that a string of Tesla fires that occurred last year was worth investigating. Lambert is quite the opposite from being anti-Tesla. He owns 3, Tesla vehicles. He's a Tesla shareholder, and he said that Musk is one of his personal heroes. So, Jason, I got this email from a reader saying that he found Elon to be toxic to the electric vehicle industry. He said he stopped following him on Twitter a year ago, and he no longer has plans to buy a Tesla car because of Elon. I'm just thinking, do you think this type of misinformation that Fred is talking about is beneficial to the advancement of electric vehicles? Or is there benefits that can come out of this as well?
Well, there's a lot of drama around Tesla. There's always been, because they tried to do something that was insane and crazy 10 years ago. And they were very ambitious, and they actually got it done, right? So all of that will lead to a lot of criticism. And also, let's face it, they built the best car on the market. So you're going to have these fanboys and fangirls, as they call them in the industry. Now, to the specific issue of fires, I think the problem is everything on the planet goes on fire except for, typically the ocean. Sometimes they do, I guess, when there's an oil spill.
Right.
So, fires are things that happen with cars, and they happen much more with gas-powered cars. If an electric car goes on fire, it has a unique profile, right? It goes on fire in a different way. Those batteries can smolder for a little while, but they don't explode in the same way that a gas car does. And I guess the hydrogen cars are even more dangerous, right? So when you have fuel on a vehicle, whatever vehicle it is dangerous. And I think that anytime there's a new technology, it gets scrutinized to a level that's 100 times worse. So I think probably the Tesla team and all electric vehicles, when they have a fire, feel like, okay, this is trending on Twitter because a Tesla went on fire and the fire department took some period of time to put it out.
And the same thing happens with autonomous vehicles as well.
Right, because it's new. Any technology that's new, people are going to demonize it and they're also going to praise it. And then over time, people get used to it. So when social media first came out, people lost their jobs because of their social media profiles. People would say something in a casual way on Twitter, like the "Has Justine Landed" hashtag. She made some kind of joke and it was slightly inappropriate, or it wasn't meant in a bad way. It was just meant as like a meta commentary, and she's loses her job, becomes a Gawker profile. So people have to, when these new technologies come out, get their bearing. And I think Tesla is just so polarizing because of what they've done and how successful they are. And then Elon's full contact, right? He's going to tweet at people now, and he's made himself accessible. And the more accessible he makes himself, I think actually it's better for the movement. So I would say better for the movement, to your original question, because it gets got more people talking about it. And the same thing with self-driving. When somebody put up a video of somebody not understanding how to use the new Tesla stoplight, and they're like, look, the Tesla stops at green lights. And it's that's how it's designed, dipshit. Did you not read the manual? It says in order to go through a green light, it'll tell you it's green, and you confirm that you want to go through it by hitting the accelerator or pushing down on the control stick, the drive shaft. It's so clear, but these people didn't read the manual. It's a new feature. And so this idiot was like, oh, I get it. And halfway through his video, he starts doing it. But that doesn't stop the press from printing some fake news headline, oh, the Tesla stops at green lights. It's yes, that's a safety feature.
I mean, everybody, all these writers online have to hit their minimum quotas for views and clicks and engagements. Just for some background, that's what makes Inside kind of special, is because we don't have to follow like this mold of just writing for clicks and impressions and stuff like that. Because I do notice that there's a lot of media hype that comes out of this community on Twitter, right? And I think like journalists or writers or bloggers who really follow this space closely, they kind of use all these social media posts that are going out on Twitter to either write about, cool things that Tesla is doing, or, write about things that they're critical about, whatnot. But I think like one side, because there's a financial incentive here, right? One side of this quote unquote battle, because, there's that battle between Tesla Q and, Tesla supporters. Tesla Q has used Twitter as a way to spread misinformation as well, right? So both sides are spreading this misinformation, and one side, which is the pro-Tesla side, it seems like they've been doing this in an effort to kind of discredit whatever Tesla Q is saying, up to the point where they can no longer identify whether something's being said by a member of Tesla Q or whether somebody's just being critical of Tesla, and they just kind of all jump on it and attack the company. So I mean, but that's what you kind of get, because like you were saying, Elon uses Twitter. This is his like playing field. He loves using it, and the company spends no money on advertising, right? Which makes it kind of dependent on these earned media or these like organic ways of, spreading news and information about the company. Reading this editorial from Fred, and I think he's actually a subscriber to the newsletter, because I know he's replied to me a few times about some of of the stuff we write about. But
I didn't understand his position. What is the valid part of his position? That all these fires should be investigated? I mean, they do investigate all the fires.
Well, this kind of goes beyond that one specific example. But what his argument is because there was a specific scenario where one member of, I call them Tesla Twitter because they're the pro-Tesla community on Twitter. He spread some misinformation about Model 3 pre-sale that was going on in China, right? Like somebody in China had actually imported a Model 3 from the US, brought it to China, put it in a showroom, and said, hey, we're starting to take $3,000 pre-orders for the Model 3 in China, right? And somebody, I think it was another like prominent Chinese-based Tesla Twitter account, and I've actually delved into this community quite deeply. But this account shared like some photos of that pre-order event, and this other member shared them to Electrek and some of these other sites, and they were kind of promoting it as like, oh, Tesla just opened up pre-orders in China. It ended up being a total scam, as uncovered by Fred. And like, that's the kind of scenarios that he says is like negative for the EV community, because I think this other member who had kind of been spreading.
What is the motivation of that person to do that? They're just pro Tesla, so they're saying positive things that aren't true? Like, I don't see how that helps Tesla.
Yeah, so that was kind of his argument, right? Is that, if you're really trying to help out Tesla, wouldn't it be more beneficial to just not spread misinformation about these things and just wait for company confirmation on whether these things will, become a reality? Which, it's a valid point, I would say.
This seems like much ado about nothing. I think right now we're in a very toxic moment for America on like two levels. You have the anti-capitalism versus socialism, or democratic socialism, I guess is the most charitable version of the socialism that's being presented to us. And then you have this Trump versus everybody, or Trump versus the left. And both of those things have just made everything super toxic on Twitter. And so, then you add to it a third layer, a third vector, which is people shorting the stock, right?
Right.
And so you have this like three levels of insanity, and then and Twitter is an anonymous platform. People forget that, but people are creating hundreds of these accounts. And so whenever you see a thread on Twitter, I just assume that these threads are 4 people with 10 accounts each, all responding to each other, which is what the Russians did, during the election with Hillary Clinton and Trump and all this kind of stuff. And they're continuing to do now. So if somebody's not a verified account or they're not an account with a large number of people and a real name, I just discount anything they say. And if they kind of get up in my grill about stuff, I just block them if they have like 5 followers and they're just a fake account. And I don't mind mixing it up. I like a good debate, but I just think a lot of this is misinformation, from all over the place.
Yeah, I don't think misinformation in any aspect helps anyone out at the end of the day. Even if you're using that misinformation to help your site achieve something, at the end of the day, just be real, be authentic, use your true voice to express what you know is true and use that voice for good, whether that's on social media or in real life.
Yeah.
All right.
100%.
So when we come back from break, we're going to be talking about Dyson. So the vacuum cleaner company, the hair dryer company, they tried to launch an electric vehicle and they finally released pictures of this canceled project. And we're going to be going over those right after the break on the Inside Transportation podcast. Stay tuned.
Hey, everybody, let me take a moment to thank Fenwick & West. They're one of the world's first and leading law firms dedicated to technology and life sciences. They operate in the fast lane of innovation where ideas often outpace changes in the law. That's where you find Fenwick's autonomous transportation and shared mobility practice, steering startups, technology giants, and major automotive companies through rapidly evolving legal, business, and regulatory challenges, which we talk about here on Inside Transportation all the time. A Silicon Valley original, Fenwick is a national law firm with offices in Mountain View, San Francisco, Seattle, New York, Santa Monica, and even Shanghai. So here's your call to action. Learn more about how Fenwick can help companies tackle the complex legal and business issues of autonomous transportation at fenwick.com. That's FENWICK.com. Thanks again to Fenwick for providing great legal services to me. I use them personally for our investments and for supporting independent media like Inside Transportation. Let's get back to this amazing episode.
And we're back here on the Inside Transportation podcast. Johan and Jason kind of chopping it up on some of the hottest transportation topics. One of them being Dyson, which is world famous for their fantastic looking vacuums and I think they do like fans. They do all sorts of cool like home appliances. A few years ago, they had actually launched a project to produce an electric vehicle. And everybody was like, what? Why is Dyson making an electric vehicle? To no one's surprise, last October, the project was canceled. James Dyson, who is actually the richest man in the UK with a net worth of $19 billion, he spent about $605 million of his own money developing this project before scrapping it. One of the reasons he said was just the money didn't make sense. The financials didn't make sense. He said this, and I quote, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and Jaguar are making huge losses on every electric car they sell. They're doing it because it lowers their emissions for them to comply with EU legislations. He doesn't have a fleet. They had to make a profit on each vehicle. They were proposing the vehicle to be sold for like $180,000 in order to make a profit on the vehicle. Yeah. So the company's still working on solid state batteries for other manufacturers. But Jason, you have the pictures right in front of you. Check them out. This vehicle was expected to have a range of 600 miles using a solid state battery, 0 to 62 mile acceleration in 4.8 seconds. And it was supposed to have 2 electric motors with 200 kilowatts. So we're going to have a dope or nope at the end. But Jason, what do you think about this car? Is it a dope or a nope for you?
Well, I mean, at 180,000, it's a nope. And I've always felt like the number where mileage just is not worth improving is 400 miles. And I feel like we're right there. So it would be a nope for me. And I think it's unnecessary and it's kind of wasteful to go to 600-mile battery range.
Right. And it's kind of interesting that, Dyson scrapped the project because of the high production costs of of electric vehicles, right? Hendrik Fisker, which I'm sure you're familiar with, recently told Business Insider that most EV startups will go out of business over the next 3 years because they face issues with manufacturing. Fisker was talking about this highly complex, difficult arena, and consumers will have less tolerance for poor build quality and lack of reliability. But when I see this vehicle, there's something that kind of speaks to me about it, and it's those seats. Look at how like futuristic those seats look and how comfortable they look.
Yeah, no, he's a great designer for sure. And that design for those seats with the like modular pads there's another seat like that's taken from. I forgot which one it is, but there is definitely a chair you can buy for your office that looks like that. And so it does look gorgeous. Dyson is a really interesting cat because if you just think about the Dyson vacuums themselves, it's not that those vacuums are necessarily better than your current vacuum. Mm-hmm. He was able to build a company where the aesthetics and the promise of the vacuum at I believe a much higher price than a normal one got people to buy it. Like, so he got people to think aspirationally and aesthetically about their vacuum, like something that lives in a closet.
Right.
And I got to give him credit for that. Is a major insight, is that people will buy boring stuff that's working just fine if it's aesthetically more pleasing or the technological promise of it is better, which is really, I hand it to him. But this is really a testament to what Tesla has achieved, that somebody like him who's got $20 billion and has access to capital, has massive credibility, like you said, richest person in the UK, mm-hmm. he couldn't get it done. It's just a testament to exactly how hard it is to do what Elon and the team at Tesla have done.
Do you think something like this, if it had actually appeared in the market, do you think it would have been successful at $180,000?
I don't think so. I mean, I think what consumers are starting to realize, putting aside people who buy Ferraris, right? Because when you get above 150K, you're starting to be in supercar category,
right?
Where, Bentleys and Ferraris. And so when you start hitting past 150, you're really saying, how does this look compared to a Bentley or a Ferrari, a Rolls Royce? Because you could even buy one of those used for that price, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it was 300,000, 2 years later it's 150 or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how much they depreciate, but something in that range. And I think most people would just rather buy two cars. Like right. if it was 180, I'd rather have a Model Y, the Jeep Wrangler with the pickup truck flatbed. I forgot what that's called. We talked about it twice. And then have a minivan for the same price.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense. If you're going to have that level of car, it has to be otherworldly, right, at that price range. It has to be a collectible, I think, or something that when you drive it down the street, people go, oh, my Lord, you have one of those? And that doesn't look like, oh, my Lord, you have one of those as a car.
It does kind of look like a Land Rover-ish. I don't know if you're getting that vibe. It looks
totally
a
looks
like
that Land Rover. There's that Land Rover Evoque.
Yes.
Is that what they call it, Evoque?
Yes, the
Evoque. Evoque or Evoque.
Yeah.
It looks like the Evoque to me. It's like if the Mini and a proper Range Rover had a baby.
Yeah, which is also a British vehicle. So I'm sure they took a lot of British design inspiration there. Moving on to our next topic here. So bikes. It seems that everybody wants to get on a bike in these COVID times, right? It's, naturally social distanced. It's very easy to get around. It's clean. But an analysis shows that bike fatalities have actually grown nationwide, with Cape Coral, Florida being listed as the most dangerous U.S. city for cyclists. This was an analysis of
I can guess why.
Take a guess. Why do you think?
Well, Florida's where people retire.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing if we look at the 100 fatalities, like 90 of them are going to be people over 75. They just let people drive way, 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 way too late.
Yeah, I mean,
they need to really. If I was in charge, anybody over 75 needs to get tested every year and does a road test every year. It's way too dangerous to be driving at that age.
Yeah, I think we often forget.
Am I anywhere near reality of why this is, or it has something to do with the way the roads are?
Experts have linked these fatality rates to distracted driving, which makes a lot of sense, right? Especially over the past few years, because everybody's been, getting all these new gadgets in their car. Like you were kind of mentioning the other day, your car does more stuff, right? So you could be a little bit more distracted. a consumer shift to trucks and SUVs as well. So people are driving bigger vehicles. And when you get hit by a bigger car, the impact is a lot worse. And an increase in driving.
Yep.
And this was obviously taken before COVID times. I'm sure that's changed a little. But other cities that are not safe is Aberdeen, Texas, San Bernardino, California, and Dayton, Ohio. These figures are important to consider because COVID-19 has actually led to a surge in bike ridership, which actually might stick around a little bit, considering that some of these cities have closed off streets for dedicated bike riding and pedestrian walking and stuff like that. But Jason, what do you think is a solution to decrease the number of fatalities with bicyclists? And, kind of just encouraging people to do green transport, right? Because that's another thing is that with everything that's happening right now in the world, more people are seeing that these are becoming viable methods of transportation. And we eventually have to figure out how can we make this safer for people and more accessible?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We need to look at the roads in the major cities and just dedicate certain avenues and certain streets only to pedestrians and bicycles with no cars on them. This is a no-brainer. In fact, as part of my mayorjason.com platform, if I ever run for mayor of San Francisco,
why not?
That's going to be one of my major ones. Exactly. Apparently, I'm overqualified. I mean, literally, I could do a better job than Trump at managing coronavirus because I know smart people, and I'd be like, you know what? I'm in over my head. I'm going to listen to smart people.
Right.
Putting that aside, I do think we should forget about bike lanes. There should just be some roads in each city dedicated to pedestrians and bicycles only. And this would be a game changer. And in Manhattan, it's pretty amazing. Like they took a half of Times Square and they cut off Broadway, I guess, cutting across, or 7th, I'm not sure which avenue, and they made it for pedestrians, right?
Yeah.
And in Santa Monica, there's the Santa Monica Promenade, 3rd Street Promenade.
Yes.
If you look historically, 3rd Street Promenade used to have angled parking. You would drive there. And of course, the people who own the stores there are like, no, we need cars. What these folks do not realize is if you got rid of cars on that street and made it pedestrian only, you would get to have a giant area in the middle where people could play safely with their kids, strollers, farmers market, carts, restaurants, outdoor, alfresco dining. This should be a major initiative in every city. We've done it in such a minor way here in San Francisco, but they put in bike lanes after people tragically got killed. An Amazon executive tragically got killed. And I'm not sure if this is the truth or not, but I believe it was an Amazon truck that killed, paradoxically, ironically, an Amazon executive.
Yes, I think I heard something about that.
Yeah, we can look it up while I'm talking, maybe, just to confirm. But and I believe Jeff Bezos knew the person personally. And, with all of this ride sharing, with all of the delivery services, with Amazon getting delivered, we got a lot more cars on the road. Some roads should just be for pedestrians. And then people would embrace this. When you go, I don't know if you've ever been to Copenhagen, in Denmark, Sweden, a lot of these places, they have the prime real estate is reserved for bicycles and for people walking. And that's what we really need to get to. I was amazed when I was in Copenhagen that we were biking around to go to dinner and whatnot, and all along the water was bicycle lanes, big ones, ones that could fit 2 or 3 cars. Imagine 2-3 lanes wide and bridges for bicycles only. That's what we need to do. And that would be the game changer of game changers. Just take the 3rd Street. They should literally take the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica and take Main Street in Santa Monica, and the whole way down, just make it a promenade. It'd be wonderful, right?
Yeah, and to confirm,
we could do that in New York. We could do it in San Francisco.
Yeah, to confirm, it was Amazon CFO or first CFO Joy Koivu who was killed while colliding with a van delivering Amazon packages while she was riding her bike. Look, I think it starts with education of drivers, right? Because I always see drivers disrespecting bicyclists out on the road.
Do you think that would really make a difference?
I think that would make a difference.
If these things are distracted drivers,
if you started
educating them?
If you started increasing like tickets and increasing fines of like, not respecting the right of way of bicyclists or, driving too close to bicyclists. Because, like, I like riding a bike from time to time. And I've had situations where I'm just trying to go out to the corner store and a car's like, almost hitting me off on the road, not really respecting my space. Because, if you're a bicyclist, you have every right to actually ride on the road and not the sidewalk. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that there should actually be more dedicated bike lines. That's, one thing I will agree with you on that, but also just like common sense, people educating themselves about what these laws are to respect bicyclists out on the road if there isn't a bike lane, right? And I think that might make people feel safer about going out running errands on a bicycle versus taking the car out. Right. I think it just comes down to this safety issue that I think people just don't feel safe going out riding on bikes. Maybe now because there's less traffic, they feel more encouraged to do so. But I think it has to start with enforcement, I think.
I just don't know if cars and bikes will ever coexist properly.
Yeah.
I would be a big fan of like building elevated highways, like the in New York they have the High Line, where they reclaimed the train system that was like on the second level of the west side of Manhattan where I used to live, and they made it into a beautiful walking park. Imagine if, I'm trying to think of a street in Manhattan, take a, you got to pick a wide street, but if a nice thoroughfare had an elevated highway where bikes could go up there and have this incredible view and cars were underneath, that would be a nice way to do it as well.
Sick.
We're just not thinking we're not thinking creatively enough. The other thing to do is, and I was thinking about this when I was in LA, and if I ever run for mayor, this is going to be definitely something I'll ping Elon about, or some other entrepreneur, is building tunnels that go underneath major avenues so that you don't have a stoplight there. So you see this in some, I know this because when I lived in Manhattan in Park Avenue, there's the Park Avenue Tunnel. And when you're coming up Park Avenue, you can go underground, and there's one lane each way, and then you pop up, you go underground on like 28th Street or whatever, and you pop up on 32nd Street or something. It's really cool. So imagine if you were driving, where are you now, Johan?
San Antonio.
So you're in San Antonio. So just imagine, whatever the most trafficked four-way stop is. And now imagine the north-south or the east-west, instead of everybody stopping, it just went underground and came back up.
Oh, man, that would be awesome.
And then the north-south just kept going.
Yeah.
So nobody has to stop.
Right.
Right? And then have you ever been in Hong Kong before?
No, I haven't been to Hong Kong, but I would love to visit.
So if you go to, if you go to Hong Kong and you just look at pedestrian bridges, they have built, when you come to a big intersection, like say this big intersection in San Antonio, they have elevators and staircases that go up, and then they have bridges for pedestrians to walk across the street so that the traffic doesn't stop and there's no way for a pedestrian to get
Yeah,
in.
so it's kind of like Las Vegas, right?
Exactly like Las Vegas, where they have those pedestrian things. So just imagine building those and having bicycles and pedestrians walking on them. It would be fabulous. And then that's the only way to save people from getting hit. And that's what's going to happen with self-driving, is they're going to pen, because I've seen this in pitches that people have sent me for making smart cities. So the smart city folks want to put, and they have this in some cities in Asia, and they have it in some areas of Manhattan, especially around Rockefeller Center, where people would basically walk into the street and get hit by buses. They would get clipped by buses. And those buses are big and fast, and they weigh a lot, and people would accidentally fall off the sidewalk and get hit by a bus. They just put 5-foot metal fences. And so the buses would drive, and, they could go roaring past at 35 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, but the humans can't possibly get into the street because there's a metal fence. You would have to hop it. And once in a while, you'll see somebody hop the fence and cross in the middle of the street, but it eliminates virtually all jaywalking.
Yeah, and I think
that's what's got to happen.
Yeah, and I think with smart cities, like you were kind of talking about, the whole dynamics of how streets are kind of constructed, it's going to change a lot to how we, move today, especially counting like ride hailing and, autonomous cars like you were kind of talking about. We won't need parking in the future, right? Because autonomous cars are just going to shuttle around all day and there will be no need for parking. And we have to think, okay, what are we going to do with that extra space? Maybe a plaza, maybe add more bike lanes, stuff like that. I think it's absolutely interesting. Moving on here. So our weekly segment, Dope or Nope, we have 2 items here on the docket. One of them is an inflatable electric bike. And you can actually, we're going to put a YouTube link in the show notes, but it actually, you can inflate it, right? It can store in your backpack and you can go take a little ride around. This was developed by the University of Tokyo. It's called Poimo, which means portable and inflatable mobility.
I'm watching the video right now. This is incredible.
Yeah, it can be inflated in less than 1 minute. It's currently 12 pounds, but it will probably be lighter when it's introduced into the market. Just keep in mind, after you watch this, you'll have to install the front and the back wheels onto this device, the electric motor, the battery, and the wireless controller before you can ride. But what do you think, Jason? Dope or nope?
I know this sounds crazy, but I think it's dope. And the reason I think it's dope is it's a 1.0, right? This is a beta product. I don't even know if it's for sale yet.
It's not. It's just a concept.
It's just a concept, but I think it's a dope concept, right? Because one of the problems with these last mile devices is what do you do with them when you get where you're going, right? And when you're in a major city or going to an office or going somewhere and then let's say going to a restaurant or the movies, what do you do with it? You leave it outside. It actually has potential. And I could see with new materials, this thing becoming more and more sturdy. So I think this could be a future. And I see people with collapsible bicycles and collapsible scooters specifically where the handle, goes into the bed of the scooter. So yeah, the portability of last mile devices is super freaking cool. So I like it. I say dope. What do you say?
I just don't like the inconvenience of having to screw on those wheels every time I want to ride.
Well, assume that it's going to get fixed.
It seems like such an inconvenience. I'm not that kind of technical guy,
So it's a nope for you.
It's a nope. I would rather just ride like a lime or a bird and not have to carry this around in my backpack. Because, right now it's 12 pounds, right? You're still carrying 12 pounds in your back. What is that, like 2 textbooks, 3 textbooks?
It's pretty heavy. It's like 3 giant laptops,
Yeah.
What's interesting about it is the future potential. See, when I look at stuff as an investor, as an angel investor, I look at something like this, and what I do is I squint, and I assume that every problem they face, they will find a solution for, and that it will get 10 times cheaper and 10 times better, right? And that doesn't always happen, but when it does happen, great companies like Tesla, Robinhood, Thumbtack, Calm, whatever, Uber get created. And so when I look at this, I say, what if it got 10 times simpler to inflate and to unfold? What if it got 10 times lighter? And even if it got half as light, it would qualify for you. And if it was half as complex to fill it up, it might even work. So right now I saw when they were filling it up, they were using like an external vacuum or, air compressor to fill it up. But if the air compressor eventually becomes built in and you press a button and it, that could be kind of cool. But yeah, I like all this stuff. I love the last mile stuff and the creativity from it. And it is up against how easy it is to find a Lime or Bird scooter. That is what it's up against, right?
Or walking.
Or walking.
The number one last mile device you have is on your body for most people. You can just walk.
Yeah. It's wonderful to walk. It's good for us.
Yeah. The next item here on Dope or Nope, we have 2 this week because I know Jason loves minivans. He's a sucker.
I love Dope or Nope, period.
He's a sucker for a good minivan. So this is the 2021 Toyota Sienna. It was inspired by Japanese bullet trains. Yet it was designed by Toyota's design teams in California and Michigan, and it gets 33 miles per gallon. What do you think, Jason, of the new Toyota Sienna minivan?
That's a tough one. I don't think the styling is radical. It's slightly, it looks like a slightly more aggressive stance, a little flare on the back quarter panels, but there's nothing about the aesthetics that knocks me over. and I don't know that the gas mileage is that great. I would really love to see Tesla make a minivan. I know they made the X. I know they're making the Y, and I sat in the Y a week ago, one of the early editions of it, and it's big inside. But I really wish there was a minivan that was electric based, and so it's a nope for me. It's not aesthetically pleasing enough. I'm not saying it's bad, but we're dope or nope. We're trying to say, is it dope? We're not saying is it good. Dope is a much higher level, right? Like dope is above great.
Yes.
So there's like okay, good, great, and then that ish is dope. This is not on that level. This is good. Maybe it's great, but it's not dope.
I mean, if I was a kid, right, and my parents were driving this minivan, I would not feel as embarrassed. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a dope.
You give it a dope?
Because
okay.
I grew up...
From a child embarrassment perspective,
yes,
I like the way
I
you're
grew
thinking.
up,
I like
we
the way you're
had
thinking.
what did we have? The Dodge Grand Caravans, the Nissan Quest.
Oh, wood panels?
And it was...
Did you have the wood panels ever?
I think we had the
faux
wood
wood?
panels in a Buick. So we had like an old school Buick. And that was, I think that was my parents' first car. And yeah, it had the wood panels. It had that like spongy kind of interior. Oh man. What I would do to get back into that car, because it was just so old. I think it was like a 70s vehicle, something like that.
See, what I want to do is I want to get rid of my minivan, and I want to get a custom conversion van.
Ooh.
My dad had a conversion van, and that was dope because it was giant in the back, and he had a table. So we had a table we could put our drinks in with cup holders. That was like a really rockin' thing in 1982, 83.
Yeah, some of those van conversions
like a
you
Ford
can,
van.
live out of. They're so crazy.
Yeah, I don't want to go that far. You know what I've always dreamed about? If I ever move back to New York or LA, but specifically New York, because I don't need it here because my commute is so small, I was going to get a Sprinter and make it into a mobile office. So when I'm doing meetings or working and get a driver and then be able to just recapture all that time when I'm driving around.
That's why you make the big bucks, Jason. You're always thinking ahead.
Exactly. Well, no, I was, who had one was Tony Shea from Zappos had one. And one time I went to LA and he's like, hey, meet me over here. And he pops out of this Sprinter van, and he was working in it. He had two of his executives with him. We had breakfast and popped back in. We had a meeting, and it's just like a mobile meeting room.
So you had a meeting in a Sprinter van with Tony Shea of Zappos.com.
He's a good friend of mine, yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, when I go to Vegas, I would say half the time I stay at the Aria because I play cards there. And then half the time I stay at Tony's RV park down in downtown Vegas, where he bought up a bunch of stuff. And he has like a couple of lots where he put mini homes, Airstreams and everything. And then when I stay there, I show up, somebody shows me my Airstream. I stay in an Airstream, and they have like a communal dinner every night in a fire pit. And they have llamas walking around.
Wow.
So it's a lot of fun.
Las Vegas for you.
The llamas.
Yeah. Well, hey, I think
crazy.
I think that wraps things up for
I think that's a wrap.
Yeah, I think it's a wrap. Llamas.
All right, this has been great.
All right, good notes to close out the show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Take care.